to see you. Thank you for being here. So welcome to our random talk thing about the album The Front of the Line. We're going to start off with some introductions. I'd like to introduce Sam Park here. He was the main producer on the album and the audio technician for most of the recording. And he was a support to lean on in the whole artistic process. So Sam, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Hey, I'm Sam. I went to college at Southern Methodist University with Lawson, and he was a great friend of mine then. He's still a great friend of mine now. I play French horn, trumpet, violin, among other instruments, and I teach orchestra.
Nice. And I am Lawson Mallory. I go by Lawson on the album cover because that's how I introduce myself to people in real life. I'm a musician. Do a lot of different types of things. I study ethnomusicology. I work as an arts administrator. I am on the board of a local nonprofit that I'm a huge fan of. I love the work that they do. They're called Voices of Change. And I record music sometimes, and I made this album of some songs that's called The Front of the Line. And we're here to talk about the process of creating it, recording it, and coming up with it, and the music and art that inspires us. So I hope you guys enjoy. How was it?
Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah,
That's great.
Okay, I'll take it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is where did this all start, right? You remember, I think the first song that's actually in the album, the earliest one to get written that's actually in the album, was the big one, The Fox and the Lion. And that was inspired by events that transpired back in my senior year of college at SMU, which was your junior year, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the SMU basketball team was in March Madness. Because that song is actually secretly, covertly, it's like all a metaphor for the SMU basketball team. There was this conversation at senior night, I think, where the head coach, who was the coach? Who's the guy after Larry Brown?
I don't remember his name, but it starts with a J.
Jankovic.
Yeah, that's right.
Jankovic comes out, he introduces the seniors, he says one of them, he compares them to animals. He said one of them was a fox and one of them was a lion.
Did he actually say that?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that that's where it started.
That's where it all came from. That's where the title comes from.
Yeah.
And so then the first section is a bunch of metaphors, and I think it's all metaphors, comparing things to animals, like when they took the net down after they won the AAC championship. That's the spider web. And I actually got a piece of that net, remember? I don't know where it is now. Man, I need to get that from my parents. That's a treasure.
Yeah, it could be worth something someday.
No, it is worth something. It's worth something to me.
Yeah, nice.
And then at the end, there's a reference to the big dance in it. And that was the first song to get written that's on the album way back then. And then that summer was the first time we started recording, because you'd done some recording work before that, right?
Yeah, so before we started working on this album, I spent a lot of time producing and engineering hip-hop albums, and some of those got published on Spotify, and other ones were just little mixtapes we did. And this was actually my first project in singer-songwriter, world music, kind of crossover kind of thing. And from the moment we started working on that, I knew it was going to be something special, and it certainly was a turbulent time. I mean, that trip that Lawson was talking about when we went to Connecticut for that tournament, oh man, it probably could have made a whole album about material from just that trip alone.
Okay, yeah, we're good. Dude, that was a crazy time. Then graduating and moving on into the summer and starting my first job after college for me were all really stressful things to overcome. But the biggest one of all was actually my grandfather died, I think about a month after graduation. And I think it was literally the day before I started work. But he had been ill for a while, and it was a really stressful time for my mother. And honestly, I wish I had supported her more during that period, but I was under so much stress myself, going through my last semester of college, trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life after that. And all of those emotions piled up, and I just happened to have taken a songwriting class that semester, that final one, and I had an outlet, a new outlet, where I could get rid of these emotions and, use them to create something. And it was awesome. I loved it so much. I loved writing songs and singing and playing my guitar that I'd had for a couple of years, but never figured out what to do with it. And so it was just this burst of songwriting, and I was like, let's go straight into the album. But that wasn't a good idea because I had no idea what I was doing. But fortunately, you had that experience before, and you knew, places to go, the tools that we needed, how much time it was going to take. I didn't have any realistic expectations of the process, but you already had a good idea of what it was going to be like, and that was hugely beneficial, I'd say.
Yeah, and like you just said it so succinctly, but isn't that the way that so many great creative projects get started? Something happening in our lives, whether tragic or something that makes us feel elated, but just some like huge emotional impact is usually, for me, and it sounds like for you too, what gives us that creative push, to go and take on a project like this big. And then being at that great university, SMU, where we were around so many other people who were, like-minded and inspirational and creative and everything, when those paths intersect, that's when, great stuff like that can happen. I know that I didn't meet anyone else at SMU that I would have taken on a project like this with. It's huge.
You were saying great things about them until you said that I was the best person you met there. Everyone's cringing.
Well, a lot of them are like very classically trained and want to play in the symphony, which is great, and kudos to them for being so laser focused on that. But to your credit, one thing that I always admired about you was you were open to other opportunities, and if something came your way that you thought might have been fun or good for you or whatever, you would always dive into it head on. And so it seemed like when you got the idea for this album, that was just another one of those things. And so when I saw that spark in your eye and how excited you were talking about it, I knew it was something that I wanted to help produce.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were there the whole time. And one of the other guys that we had helping out in the very early stages, do you remember when Dallas was working with us for
Dallas
2
the
months.
person or Dallas
the person,
city?
not the city. No, actually, we got the Office of Cultural Affairs to provide us funding for this project. We have to say that because it's part of the contract agreement.
Thank you.
Now we can continue. Dallas the person.
Dallas the person, man.
Yeah, we used his
Good guy.
house for the first 2 recording sessions, and those were crazy times. We recorded it till 2 in the morning. Didn't we?
Yeah, definitely multiple times we were recording at least that late. But one thing that I kind of got out of working on this project in particular was just the studio in a backpack setup.
Yeah.
We would each bring a backpack with a mic and a mic stand and a computer interface and all the cables we needed. And then wherever we happened to be recording that day, we just set everything up, tape it down, and then just get to work.
Yeah, that's true. And a couple of times we recorded in your garage, in that little studio that you built in there.
Yeah.
Those were a lot of fun. Those were actually I think the very first recordings I ever did. And I was like, man, this is cool. This is really fun.
I gotta give credit to Derek Horn, who is a professor at SMU and a great friend of ours. And one summer, I think this was maybe 2 summers ago, 2 or 3, I went down and met with him in the very lowest basement of SMU one day during the summer and just said, hey, I'd like some help with producing this album that I'm doing for Lawson. And so showed him some of the tracks that we had been recording in literal closets and stuff like that. And he was like, well, it sounds pretty good, Sam, but there's all this noise in the background. And it was kind of the thing where I didn't hear it before, but as soon as he pointed out, I could not unhear it. And he showed me different ways that you can scan the frequency on the EQ to kind of bring out where different parts of the room are resonating with sound that you don't want in there. And so with his help and mentoring, I was able to create different kind of studio setups for wherever we were going to be. So like on my computer, I'd have one setting that we would use when we were at Dallas's, and then another setting that we would use when we were in like my closet, or another one when we were in my dorm or whatever, to be able to still get like a cohesive sound on the whole thing. Because when you listen to the album, it's all recorded in different places. That was not done in one studio.
Dude, those dorm sessions, I'd forgotten about those. Those were amazing. That was also over that summer. We just had to hope that no one was in the room next to us or outside of the window shouting about something. But I think we got pretty lucky and never really had any incidents. It was always a good spot.
Yeah, we got some good takes for sure. I remember there'd be a few times when we'd have to stop because there was a garbage truck or something that was going outside.
It lent a natural feeling to it, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing on the album is there's so many times when there's like ambient sounds of nature on there that, you know, we kind of put in.
Yeah.
I think those really add to it.
But then most of the audio that got used on the final product, that all came in one big marathon recording session last July, right?
Yeah, I remember how that got started is before July of 2019, we had already tracked out the whole album in essence. And like, you know, maybe there were some parts that we had planned on doing over, but for the most part, we thought we were done with it. And then we met together one day, and I think we were listening through it, and then just decided, no, we just need to, you know, start a lot of this over. And so we did. We came up, we like wrote it all down, like the timeline, how we were gonna do it, and over the course of like maybe a month.
It was an entire month. We started like July 2nd and finished, I swear, on July 31st.
Yeah, and it was like almost every single day we were over here just grinding, recording, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the middle of the day, just whenever we could, because you were still working, you know, your full-time job.
On weekends, we did middle of the day, and on other nights, it was just I get home from work and you come over as soon as you can, and we just go straight through.
Yeah, I think that's another one of those things where just, you know, when great things happen, a lot of times in life, we've all got to work our jobs. So you got to do what you can with the limited amount of time you have outside of that for, you know, different creative outlets you have, or side job or hobby or whatever. But thankfully we were able to make it work.
Yeah, but you know, if you think about it, in the movie Fight Club, they only show him at work, like for 4 scenes or something. So all the exciting stuff about his life is happening at night. Wow. No, I haven't. Oh God, I didn't say that. I love my job. It's a wonderful place to work. I was just making an analogy, and I'm going to promptly remove my foot from my mouth. What were you going to talk about next?
So can you talk about what you did in Austin for the recording?
Oh yeah, so after that marathon recording session, we sent it to a guy to master, and he was in the process of moving out of town, and I really didn't know what I wanted, so it ended up we weren't able to finalize it then. And a few months later, I say to myself, you know, this is like the 3rd time we've started this project over. I really wanted to finish it this time. You know, 3rd time is the charm, right? So I was asking people. There's some guy I met on Facebook Messenger who's actually become a really good friend, but who lives in Oregon. I've never actually seen him in real life, but he's also into music and singing and recording, and he knew a place up in Oregon nearby him that I thought, you know, maybe I can send him the files and they can work on it. And I asked him about it, and I asked some other folks I knew who did recordings. I reached out to a couple studios, and then finally I got in touch with one down in Austin. It turned out to just be awesome. They had just finished the 3rd EP of a punk band that I'm a huge fan of. They're so good. The Happy Alright. One of my best friends from Meadows is in that band, and another awesome guy. Make It Up. They've got a drummer who's joined within the past year. I think he's fantastic too. And they just finished up this record, and the mixing and the mastering was down at this studio, and I got to go down there, and it was a really interesting experience, an eye-opening experience, I'd say, because the work that I did with you was eye-opening, but this was like another level of the same thing. Instead of taking the studio out of a backpack, the studio was an entire house that had been converted into like, oh, this room is where they've got the drum set and the piano and the instruments set up already with a mic in front of them just all the time, so you just walk up there and record. And this room has a place where you plug in your laptop, and then it's got speakers and mixing and mastering boxes, physical boxes all over the walls, and the track with the volume adjusters and automation and everything, and a little couch back here for the guy who's listening to it all. And then they've got the kitchen, because you gotta have a snack there, because these are 12-hour days, man.
And a coffee.
And a coffee. And they've got some storage in the other rooms, and they've got this big outside area because, oh my gosh. For me, being there for 12 hours was like, it was like being stuck at the hospital for a long time. Where if you know you're not, really sick, and it's like something that you just gotta wait for your knee to get your feeling back, and then you get to leave. It was that kind of feeling where it's just, I'm able to suppress the anxiety because I know that it's going to be over at some point, and it's simple.
Yeah.
But if you're a whole band there, and you've got like all four guys having different opinions about what the guy's mixing and mastering, and they're stuck there for 12 hours listening to the music over and over again, like focusing in on every little bit of it, you guys are going to get angsty, and somebody's going to need to go stand outside for a little bit.
Yeah, and like Lawson and I are both classically trained, whatever that means. So, there's a lot of times when like musicians are getting together in their ensembles, and you're in like those long rehearsals, and especially after you've been rehearsing the same piece of music for a while, it kind of all starts to like sound like the same kind of shade of gray, and so you've got to change something, whether that's like playing in a different setting to hear what it sounds like in there, or somebody steps out and goes and hears it, from a different area of the room, or just like taking a break or whatever, because it all starts to sound the same to your ears after a while. Well, I found the same thing when I started working in studios is, if you're behind the computer listening to the mix for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, no matter how many adjustments you're making, or, trying to choose between takes, they all start to sound the same after you've been doing it long enough, so you really got to take those breaks. Man, that coffee really comes in handy. Sometimes you gotta walk out and have a coffee and a cigarette before you can hear it better.
Yeah, and this was another example of a situation where I greatly benefited from working with someone who had a lot of experience. The guy down there at that studio, he knew exactly what he was doing, and he was able to coach me through the psychological parts of it too, saying, man, it seems like you need a break now. How about we take lunch now? I was like, that's not a bad idea. So then we got an hour off. He kept mixing while I was away, picking up food for the both of us. So he was still able to get work done. It was just I was able to just take a moment, stop listening to it, just roll down the windows, hear the real world for a little while. He knew exactly what he was doing with that, and with all the mixing and everything. He came up with some great sound effects, and he knew when this is a situation where we do need to do a little bit extra recording. So that was another spot where some of the sounds that you'll hear were created down at the studio in Austin. But overall, it was a really fun experience. Even waking up at 7 in the morning or 6:30 or something, leaving at 7, getting there at 10, staying there until 10 p.m. and driving home and stopping at Buc-ee's, of course, and then and then coming back and getting home at like 1:30 in the morning and just going straight to sleep.
So I know that he did all the mastering and most of the mixing on it. How much of like the recording and tracking happened in Austin versus up here in Dallas?
I think I remember all of the recording that happened there. And on the first song, there was no recording in Austin. On the second song, same thing. Same on the third song. Third song, there was a lot of mixing done there, and then some more back up here. After that, there was many levels of mixing. It's well mixed.
Yeah.
You gotta say.
Yeah, it's polished. It's polished.
And then the fourth one was the first one that had any stuff down there on it, and we recorded drum set. And that's why the drum set sounded so different between 2 and 4.
Drum kit's just one of those really challenging things to record in a home studio. We tried recording drum kit once in Lawson Music Studio here, and I think we tried to do it with just one overhead.
Yeah.
So like in recording, especially for drums, if you just have one mic pointing down, that's called an overhead mic. And like typically in like an ideal setting, there's a different mic on every drum on the kit. So like you have a cymbal mic, you have a hi-hat mic, you have a snare mic, you have a tom mic, high tom, low tom, and then a floor mic that goes on the bass. And sometimes they even put multiple mics on one drum.
Yeah.
And like they usually have a whole like setting they use for the kit that they move across depending on whoever's using the kit, so that they don't have to start from scratch every time, because that would be crazy. But we tried to do it with one overhead, and it wasn't horrible, but it was way better, I'm sure, when you got into the real studio.
Sam, that takes an album.
Oh, really? Which one?
We'll let them see if they can tell.
Okay, alright, I like that.
Honestly, I like the sound that we were able to create, because so much of recording is also taking the natural sound that you heard in the studio that you thought, yeah, this is the one, and being able to transform it in ways that you couldn't, with your hands and your feet, ways that you could only do on the computer. It's like, wow, that's a new spectrum of sound that we're experiencing as we kind of fidget around with these buttons, whatever they do. Yeah, that's what I did. He knew what he was doing. The guy at the studio knew what he was doing. I just kept hearing, wow.
But we tried to make it work,
It did.
I felt like so many times we would just have to play around with it and try different things until we liked the sound of it. We broke a lot of rules making this album, for sure. But one of my favorite artists, Pablo Picasso. Everybody thinks about those really abstract paintings when you think of Picasso, but a lot of people actually don't know that when Picasso started as an artist, he was trained, to be like a typical kind of painting. I guess like something like this, or like portraits even more like normal or whatever than that, like portraits of people. Picasso started doing stuff like that, and he would have been a great portrait painter. But at some point he was like, well, I know all the rules. I can paint really well with all the rules. I'm gonna break them all now. We did a lot of rule breaking for this one.
Wasn't he like a master of realism or whatever it's actually called by the time he was 14?
Yeah, he definitely was.
And then he said, I'm gonna do my own thing.
Yeah.
Like you said, man. We got some catching up to do.
Yeah, I was actually watching a documentary last night about a different painter, and I'm trying to remember who that is. Who's the guy that did like all the composition?
Mondrian.
Oh, yeah, Mondrian. Yeah, I was watching a documentary about him. With all those lines. Art's pretty crazy. Sometimes you look at those paintings and just see like the lines intersecting like this, and it looks really boring. But then like when you hear some background on it or try to look at it from a different perspective, it's like a lot more interesting.
Well, I was noticing the same thing about a movie I was watching last night, actually. It's a comedy. It was Naked Gun. I love that series. I grew up on that. It's hilarious. But the thing is, it's not slapstick at all. Like, the jokes, most of the time in those movies, they deliver them in a way that they don't give any hint with their the tone of their voice or their facial expression or the sound effects. They don't give any hint that they're making a joke. They just say something that's incredibly hilarious. And if you're paying attention to it and you're really trying to hear the joke, then you hear, and it's amazing, and you just laugh your butt off for an hour and a half. But if you're kind of just casually watching and you're waiting for the laugh track to go off or for some like whoop sound effect, to hint, oh, this is when I laugh. Oh, I love comedies. Then you're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're kind of talking about like, you know, the multi-layers of like a piece of art. Like there's that surface level of when you first look at it, you know, what you see is what you get. And then like, you know, the paying more attention, different perspectives, like really dissecting it and then being able to get more about it. So like, with that in mind, can you kind of talk about how that applies to this album?
Ooh. Okay, yeah. The mixing and the mastering, all that effort that we put into it after recording, and actually all the different times we re-recorded it, were really crucial because that creates the icing on the cake of the album. That is what people see orally with their ears when they first experience the album. They see that icing, all the perfection that we try to get into recording, and all of the thought and precision that went into the mixing and mastering process is what makes it sound professional, what makes it sound like somebody who knows what they're doing created this music, which is not true, because I created this. The ones that knew they were doing were Sam and the guy at the studio. But all of that is just a fortification of the heart and the soul of the music. And don't get me wrong, Sam put his heart and soul into this. But the music, the heart and the soul, is the emotion that I was feeling when I said, okay, tonight I need to pick up my guitar and start strumming some chords and try and come up with something to express what's running through my head right now. And that's where the song is for me. But you have to thicken it and dress it up and give it more flavor and something that makes it recognizable if you're going to deliver that message to someone else. It's kind of like what words are. You know, we all use, people that all speak English use the same words, but they're not actually necessarily feeling the same emotion when they say, oh, I'm angry. It's not exactly the same thing that's in somebody's heart, but they could both be saying that they're angry.
Yeah, and like what you just said kind of makes me think back to the Fox Online, which you were talking about at the very beginning of this. That song, to me especially, has so many different like little Easter eggs in it. And like one of my favorite ones is the rhythm that starts the song, the clave rhythm. People, you might have heard of the clave, which is an instrument, but the clave is also a rhythm, right?
Yeah.
And I actually didn't know this until Lawson told me about it. The clave is both an instrument and a rhythm, and it starts with that clave rhythm, and then the whole song just like kind of like opens up from that. It's really cool.
So, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that I can talk about for a little bit, fill some air. And you're exactly right. It's hard to be exactly right because the clave is from a different language, so I can't really express properly what the ideas that they have about the clave in Cuba, where it comes from, but I'll try. It is the first thing that most people would think of if they've heard the clave is the instruments, two little wooden sticks, maybe about this wide, about this long, you hit them together. There's a different variant that makes a more thuddy sound. It's a bit bigger, one of them's a bit bigger and the other one's smaller, and the bigger one's kind of hollow in the center, so it's able to it creates that thud that way. The other one's more sharp and piercing. And you've heard it if you've ever heard something that Desi Arnaz was singing from I Love Lucy, or any
That's
any
like
kind of
Hispanic
authentic
music.
Latin thing.
Yeah, Latin.
Exactly. They probably have it. No, they definitely have it in music from Mexico, from Cuba now, probably from Jamaica too, and some stuff in Africa. A lot of music from the Caribbean that was recorded by labels, organizations from the U.S. A lot of those or even some from Spain, honestly. and France and whatever country had a big influence in that island, recorded it, and some of those records made it back to Africa through trade and through interactions of all different types. And some people in Africa started actually playing Cuban music, and there's a huge thing called Congolese rumba. That's what it's called if you Google it, and if you're American and maybe European, it's called Congolese rumba, but it's called something else there. And it's beautiful music. It really is. And they use the same sound to express a different emotion, once again. But the clave is that instrument, and it's also, like you said, a rhythm that underpins everything everybody else is doing. The rhythms that the congas play, or the bongos, if there's bongos there, or the timbale, or all of the other rhythm section instruments, play rhythms around the clave that interact with it and create a rhythmic conversation. And then the melody parts, if they're doing really rhythmic melody, they're also doing that exact same thing, having that interaction. And the singer uses that as the beat. So instead of feeling music like most of the time we do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, or a little waltz, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I think they feel rhythm there as
Yeah, and just by the way you talk about it, it's amazing to me just like how knowledgeable you are about different cultures from the world and the music from there, and you're also so great at like putting those together. So like the Fox and the Lion, you gotta stop me if I'm wrong here, because I'm probably gonna say something incorrect here, but like the clave is from Cuba.
Yeah.
The congas are also from Cuba?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are Cuban too. But then the guitar is from Spain, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the guitar is Spanish, and all three of those instruments are featured in the song, plus there's drum kit in there too, isn't there?
No, there's not drum kit in that one, but there is, there's, oh my gosh, what is the other stuff?
Yeah, there's a Gyil.
There's the Gyil, yeah.
Which is from Ghana.
That's from Ghana.
So like all these different instruments from different countries.
And there's the European kind of Gregorian chant bit. At least that's what I was trying to imitate.
And then there's like, the very like American like singer-songwriter aspect to it. So like as a songwriter / musician, how do you kind of bring all those things together and make it sound, cohesive?
Honestly, a lot of the time for me, that's really what creates the music. I'm inspired by a chord progression that I happen upon when I'm noodling around, or I'm inspired by the sound of this instrument that I've got. The Gyil really inspired this song. The chord progression that it uses was something that I actually recorded really early on, like probably 4 or 5 years ago when I first wrote this song 3 years ago. And it was just me playing those chords on the guitar and improvising on the 2 Gyil over those chords for like 3 or 4 minutes. And I have that on Soundcloud somewhere. And I go back and listen to it all the time because it's amazing. And I said, I want to make a song with that, with lyrics, singing, not just the playing, because I think it's got really good potential. And so that was already there for me. And then one day I was playing those chords, and the lyrics kind of came into my head from the coalescing of thoughts I was having about how much fun we were having with the basketball team, about what it was like to say, well, this is the end of my college career, and everybody always says college is the best 4 years of my life. Does that mean I'm at the front of the line? I mean, that's what the that's what the whole message of the song is it feels like right now we're having the very best time that we're ever going to have in our lives, and for the rest of it, it's all downhill from here. And it was a really strong feeling, and that's why the song is so long, because that's something you really have to fight to get through. But I got through it because we just kept trying again to record, and I was doing more and more interesting stuff in my career with the organization that I work for and the other organization that I volunteer with, and I was meeting. I wasn't meeting any more people. That was kind of downhill after college, but there's nothing you can do about that. But it's. I don't know why I started talking about that.
Well, we've talked a lot about The Fox and the Lion, and I saw your Instagram post today about saying that's like the magnum opus of the album.
Oh, yeah.
I totally agree. But to kind of lighten the mood here a little bit, another one of my favorites from the album is the Move song.
Ooh.
Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Okay, this one I can do, and it's pretty cheery. This one's called The Daily Moves. It's the 4th song on the album, and it's my tribute to Robert Johnson, and I hope he's not rolling over in his grave or dancing in a circle next to the devil whom he sold his soul to. But it's my blues song, and I don't know why I was really playing a lot of blues or fiddling around with a lot of blues in December of 2018, I think, around that period of time. But I was. And I hadn't written a song in a while, so maybe that's why I went back to the blues, because it's such a reliable format.
Yeah, you talk about songwriting.
Yeah.
Nowhere better to get great songwriting than the blues.
Exactly. That's where it all began, really. Or at least in the tradition that we're part of. But it always starts with a girl, doesn't it? Sometimes, not really always. But this is one that does. I was really attracted to somebody, their personality and their height, and
the vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't forget the vibes.
Exactly, that's what it was. Honestly, and I found out that she was vegan, and there is a Bob Johnson song that's called, I don't remember what it's called, but where he says, as part of the lyrics, I've got mean things on my mind. But the way he says it, when I heard it the first few times, I thought he was saying, I've got methane, like methane, but methane on my mind.
Oh.
And I said, man, I can use that to make a song that promotes veganism. So what that song is saying, essentially, is that I'm at a farm, I'm trying to see a cow, because that seems like a natural thing for somebody to do. From the city, you've never seen a cow in real life. You go to a farm and walk around, like, give me a cow.
Walking on a farm trying to see a cow.
Exactly, man. That's what it's all about. But then I realized that because the cow, defecates on the ground, and then the cow is like eating grass that hasn't been defecated upon. Well, if you think about the law of conservation of matter, like where your fat cells and your muscle cells come from, and the ones that replenish it, the ones that grow you, where they come from is literally the food you eat. It's being transformed into your body.
Mm-hmm.
So that cow is eating grass that has a little bit of defecation left on it. And that cow is literally being made of its own or another cow's defecacy. Whatever the word is. And then you eat that cow later on. You're eating that cow's defecacy because it's made up of its own defecacy. And at the same time, when it farts, it puts a lot of methane in the air. And you're breathing that air. So you've got just defecacy in your stomach and in your lungs. So basically, no cows. Except I eat cows all the time. I just had some pork today, which is not made of a cow, but vegans don't like it.
Make sure you send that song to PETA and they'll use it in all their promotional ads.
See, it would work if they could ever get it past the censors. Don't let your people under 13 listen to this one.
But PETA has had some very violent almost ads.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen the ads where they're like, this is what it looks like when someone's really mean to a dog, and I'm like,
they have a powerful message, and you know they're not afraid to show it.
Well, I try and convey a powerful message with divine comedy.
What are the songs we talk
the
about?
daily moves. Oh my gosh.
We could talk
What's
about
your
Amazing
favorite
Grace.
song?
Amazing Grace actually is my favorite one, so that's perfect. So
Okay.
like I'll kind of talk about it a little bit first. Everybody knows the song Amazing Grace, you know, but
You never heard it?
well, you can talk about that in a second.
Okay.
But this song, the Amazing Grace that we all know, is actually just one verse of a bigger song, or is it a
Not
poem?
it's just a song.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I only knew the original verse when we first started, and because of Lawson's like cover / rendition of the song, I got to learn some of the other verses too, which is really cool. And like the history of the song is really interesting too. And man, we had several recordings of this song that we made, and every time we would finish it, like a good take that we liked, I would just listen to it on repeat over and over and over in my car. I just loved it.
Man, dude, I'm so glad to hear that. But yeah, this one, it might be my favorite song on the album too, honestly. But I'm gonna backtrack a little bit to lead into this. I'm gonna mention the structure of the album is also kind of it's an Easter egg too,
Nice.
because what we've got is it's split into halves by the intermission. Literally, one of the songs is called Intermission, and it's where there's like a really big change in the feel, the type of song, and the length of song. Because the first half is made up of about 4-minute songs, and the second half, is 2 songs that each I think surpass 7.5 minutes.
Fox and the Lion and Amazing
And
Grace.
Amazing Grace, exactly. But the first 4 songs, they're actually, the first 3 are in D major, and then the next one is in A blues. So I put those together like that to imitate the structure of a symphony, of a 4-movement symphony or something.
Oh,
We've got a nice moderate speed intro. In the same key, we've got a more up-tempo one. And then the third, we've got the really passionate but slower, softer one. And then we've got a scherzo to close it out in the 4th movement, in a new key, in the 5th. That's the first half. So we got the symphony on the first half, and then there's intermission. And then the second half is the big one. So admittedly, it doesn't work out as well, but I'm trying to imitate the structure of literally a symphony concert that you have, where you kind of get like the intro with and a couple of smaller pieces at the beginning, then intermission, and the big one on the second half. But I put the first 4 songs in order to imitate the structure of a symphony.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's symphonic on both sides, sort of.
And I think, maybe it doesn't matter, but I think the Fox and the Lion is what? It's in C, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in C.
Yeah.
So
and
it's
then
just a completely different piece.
Amazing Grace. What is that one? Because that's just guitar
I
and
want to say that's an A, but it's 2. They're not real chords. I mean, they are real chords that you can write out. You can say these are the notes, and you can even do the shorthand of it. I think one of them might be like an A sus, but
It's
it's
either A or G. It's one of those.
yeah, might be G.
Yeah, it might be G.
But the chords were just really idiomatic chords, which, if I'm not mistaken, to the best of my definitional abilities. Defecation abilities. I'm really going to defecate on this one. It means it's idiomatic if it's really easy to play, if it just makes sense for your finger to move from this note to this note in a really casual manner. You know, it's not somebody's trying to do this and that, and it's not idiomatic if you have to contort your body in weird ways or really stretch yourself out. So I think it's really idiomatic chords that if you write them, it's harder to write them out than it is to play them. But it was such a beautiful progression to my ears, at least, and the rhythm that I came up with when I was just noodling one night, I think after we watched Game of Thrones somewhere, I was just obsessed with that rhythm for such a long time. And then I thought, I need to write words to this. But then I realized, I had this moment where I said, you know what I can do? I can say that this little vamp here is too good for words. And so I'll just take someone else's words and put it on it. And the person whose words I used were, if I had to pick anyone, it would be this person, because he probably wrote one song. He might have written, a few. He wasn't a prolific writer, I don't believe. He was a priest named John Newton, who had strong religious experience. He was a priest before, but he became really intensely devout afterwards, and he almost died, I think, on a slave ship crossing the Atlantic. And then he became very devout afterwards, and actually became an abolitionist, and was big in the British anti-slavery movement. And that's why that movie about the anti-slavery movement that came back, like 2006 maybe, it's called Amazing Grace, because he was such an important figure, and this is the song that everybody knows. And
it's like a spiritual, right?
Yeah, well, no. It was written by a British guy. It's not like an African American spiritual.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a classic European hymn. Now, I love spirituals, but this just isn't one.
Classic appropriation.
No, it's not appropriation of any kind. This is derivative of ancient Gregorian chant harmonic styles. This is something they've been doing forever.
Huh.
Yeah, I think maybe it has some influence.
So why did I think of it as a spiritual? I feel like a lot of people have that perception, right?
I think a lot of people associate the hymns that you sing in church with spirituals, because so many spirituals did become classic hymns. I don't know if Swing Low Sweet Chariot. Yeah, Swing Low Sweet Chariot. I think that's a spiritual. I may be deathly wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's a spiritual. And
we'll get a church organist to fact check us on this.
But that is definitely something that I've sang in church before. And there are plenty of others that I'm just blanking on them right now. But Amazing Grace was part of the older tradition. Like Silent Night is German, but it's of the same European hymn tradition. Yeah. But this song Amazing Grace was actually what we call my song. Probably in my family, it might have just been a thing between my mother and I. She had the same with my brother. His song was "You Are My Sunshine," which Johnny Cash sang and recorded at one point. But every morning to wake up when we were teeny tiny kids, my mom would always sing that to my brother, and she would always get him first because he was older, and so I would know it was coming. And then she'd come over and she'd sing to me to wake me up, and it was always Amazing Grace.
That's dope, man.
And that song that's been my song forever. And anytime it's come up, like they randomly, arbitrarily select hymns in church or whatever process they go through, anytime it was on the bulletin, I was like, this is a special day for me. This day was designed specifically for me. And I know it wasn't, I think I knew at the time it wasn't necessarily that wasn't necessarily the case, so specifically, but it was still a powerful feeling, and it still is now.
Manifesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Law of attraction, baby.
I'm attracting Amazing Grace to me, I hope, because I love that song, and when I sing it, man, and like you were talking before about the different levels of a piece of art. And the different levels of experience. This one doesn't really have that many layers, but it does have levels of perception. Because if you just listen to it really passively, you might think, cool, this is a different arrangement than I've ever heard before. I've never heard it sung like this. It's nice, but what I recommend when you're listening to this one is getting yourself in the comfiest chair or the comfiest position you can find, maybe even getting a yoga mat and lying on the floor, and having either your earbuds plugged in, your best earbuds, or your big speakers if you got them, and just completely relaxing yourself and plugging into this. Because the goal of it is to kind of just overtake you with this calm, musical sensation that pushes down your nerves and your tension. It's supposed to be like a musical massage that comes after this, the 4-part symphony on the first half with these different changes and these inflections, and then the intermission with all the weirdness there, and then this big magnum opus with all these different sections and these instruments you never heard, and then it simplifies down and just vibes for a little while. It's like a palate cleanser for your body and soul.
Yeah, I think on Amazing Grace in particular, it just has like a lot of nuance to it. Because one of the things I loved about this project was bringing all these different instruments and like styles together and trying to make it sound cohesive. But when we did Amazing Grace and we were recording it, it was really simple. We just needed one mic, or did we use two? I think we ended up just using one. We tried it with two. We tried to do one on the guitar, one on the voice, and just trashed it and said, let's just do one mic. We just did like an overhead. They captured everything, and then we did it all in one take. So it's all on one track, one take, and had to be perfect. Took us some time, but once we got it, we knew it was the one. And man, I love that song, and I talked about like playing it in my car a lot. But when you were writing that, and then when we recorded it, that was while we were in college. And so like a lot of people listening might recall, like when you were in college, a lot of nights you spent like driving people home at the end of a night going out. And so whenever I would be driving people home after a long night, and I'm the DJ, so to speak, like I'm playing the music, I would always say, okay guys, all right, everybody shut up.
Nice.
I need you guys to listen to this. Turn on Amazing Grace, turn it up, make everybody shut up and listen. Man, that song is just powerful. I love that song.
Damn. Dude, you never told me that before. That's amazing.
I probably did that while you were in the car once or twice, didn't I?
Maybe a couple times, but I didn't realize you did that when I wasn't there. That's so cool.
No, man, for sure. That was the one that I like to show off the most. Like when people will be talking about, what am I up to, and I tell them I'm working on this project with you, that would always be the first one I show them. I think it's something that a lot of people can kind of like grab onto since they know Amazing Grace, but just your take on it, I just think it's so great.
Damn, thank you, man.
Yeah,
that's
for
awesome.
sure, dog.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun to record because that one was one that every time we stopped and restarted, I think we did a take it at. And there's one from your dorm that summer. There were a couple from my house, maybe one from your garage, I think. And then when we got here and we did that marathon session, you kept telling me, and you were right about this, when I recorded the instrument by itself and then sang, the feeling of the two of them didn't glue together as well. That's why I did them both at the same time. And that was a struggle for me to do them together, so I kept trying to resist you, but you were right, man, and you persisted, and we got a good take. I just had to get my technical skills really up to par in order to pull that off. And then down in Austin, there was this miracle that happened with it. Honestly, you could say that when we put it into the mixer, and I said it might need some auto tune on it because I don't think my singing was quite perfect, and we just turned on the function with the default settings and hit play, and it created this incredible effect on the ukulele that sounds like a detuned piano. And it's not as drastic as you might think. It doesn't sound like a horror movie or awful or anything. And we buttressed the original recording with a lighter version of just the ukulele by itself, matching the speed and the feeling and the inflections and the rubato that I did in the original recording. And those two effects are basically the only changes that got made down in Austin, minus the setting the levels and the EQ and all that stuff. And from the perfect take that you got me to do, add in the mixing that they did. and then the mastering, it combined to just create something that I agree with you. It's awesome. It really is.
Yeah. One thing that this project taught me is like a lot of my favorite albums or like deluxe albums or like later on they'll release like, you know, alternate takes of your favorite songs, and so you'll go listen to these alternate takes and some of them just sound like completely different and you're like, well, I kind of like this one too, you know, why didn't they choose this one? And that's how I felt with Amazing Grace. It's like I love the one that we chose for the album, but some of those like alternate takes were pretty good too, you know, it's just a different flavor.
Yeah, I love going back and looking at the alternate takes, honestly. There was one time that I tried to do the Fox and the Lion in my closet up in my parents' home in McKinney. And for the chorus parts, because I was trying to be quiet, I didn't think about, you know, jumping the octave or anything like that. So what I did was I tried to create a chorus effect because I was a dumbass and didn't know what I was doing. I tried to create a chorus effect by singing it multiple times myself, but different accents. So I had one where I was pretending I was a Russian guy. I was like, maybe one love was a or something like that, and I'm British going, that might be right, the front of the, and it actually did create a chorus effect, but you could also really clearly hear the weird accents.
Yeah.
So I had to nix that one.
But that ended up coming in well, I remember doing that.
Yeah.
That was fun, man. So many good Easter eggs on this album. So, like, what am I forgetting? Are there some other songs you want to talk about?
Yes, I think there are, but I think we should take a short break, make sure the video and the audio are working. We'll see you in a moment.
Here, I'll give you a segue.
No, we need a different segue. So we've run out of tape, and we're just going to have the closing segment here. What was your bid?
So, the front of the line, Lost and Mallory, will be available on all streaming services when?
It's going to be coming out on June 12th. It's about 4 weeks from today. There will be a pre-release about 2 weeks prior to that, so you can get a little sample, and then have the rest of the meal on June 12th.
And Lawson and I are working on some more live performances of the album and other music as soon as this COVID-19 outbreak is over. What else can the listeners expect from you, Lawson?
There might be some more music videos, maybe some photos getting dropped of random things walking around. Maybe some poems that have nothing to do with the album, but are just kind of inspirational, you know. And some other content like this to keep you interested until the album comes out. And thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoyed listening. If you have any questions, just hit us up. Lawson Mallory, Sam Park. It's great to be with you.
Thank you, Lawson.
Best of luck. Okay, I got that. I'm gonna get it. Okay, ready? Good evening, sir. Nice to see you.
Wait, do that one more time. I didn't know that we were going to shake hands. I wanted to look at your hand when you're coming